Once the beating heart of America's automotive empire, Detroit was a city where dreams were forged in steel and horsepower. It was the Motor City, the birthplace of icons like Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors. At its peak, Detroit wasn't just building cars, it was building the future. But behind the roaring engines and shiny chrome was a darker story, one of unchecked greed, corporate mismanagement, and a system that prioritized profit over people. While automakers made billions, the workers, the real backbone of the industry, were left to struggle. Jobs were outsourced, factories shut down, and entire neighborhoods were abandoned. The same companies that built an empire drove it into collapse, chasing short-term gains at the cost of long-term stability. So what really happened to Detroit? How did the proud capital of American innovation become a symbol of economic ruin? In this video, we're digging deep into the rise and fall of America's car capital and how greed took the wheel. Detroit wasn't always a story of collapse, it was once the crown jewel of American industry. In the early 20th century, it emerged as the birthplace of modern manufacturing. Thanks to Henry Ford's groundbreaking assembly line, cars could be produced faster and more affordably than ever before. Suddenly, the automobile wasn't just a luxury for the wealthy, it was within reach for everyday Americans. This innovation sparked an economic boom. Jobs were plentiful, and people from all over the country and the world flocked to Detroit. By the 1950s, C's population had soared to nearly 2 million. Immigrants, African Americans from the South, and others came seeking opportunity and a better life. Detroit quickly became a vibrant melting pot of cultures and ambition. At the heart of it all were the big three: Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. Together, they didn't just build cars, they shaped the American dream. For decades, Detroit stood as a symbol of progress, prosperity, and possibility. While Detroit thrived on the surface, trouble was quietly brewing beneath. The very companies that had driven its success, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, began making decisions that prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. Greed, complacency, and a resistance to change slowly set in. By the 1970s and 80s, consumer preferences were shifting. Americans wanted smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, especially in the wake of rising fuel prices and environmental concerns. But instead of adapting, the big three doubled down on what had worked in the past. Big, gas-guzzling vehicles with flashy designs, but poor mileage. Meanwhile, Japanese automakers like Toyota and Honda were quietly winning over American drivers with cars that were reliable, affordable, and efficient. Detroit's automakers dismissed the competition, believing their dominance was untouchable. But that arrogance came at a cost. Innovation was stifled, investments in quality and fuel economy lagged. And slowly, the city that had once led the world in automotive excellence began to lose its grip on the industry it helped create. As global competition grew fiercer, the big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, raced to stay ahead. To maintain profit margins, they turned to cost-cutting strategies, outsourcing manufacturing jobs overseas and investing heavily in automation. On paper, these moves made financial sense, but on the ground, they left a trail of devastation. Detroit's once vibrant factories, once the heartbeat of American industry, began to shut down. Assembly lines went quiet. Workers, many of whom had spent decades honing their skills, were suddenly out of a job. The middle class, built around stable, union-backed manufacturing work, started to crumble. The effects rippled far beyond the factory gates. Local businesses closed, neighborhoods deteriorated, and entire communities lost their sense of purpose. Families struggled to make ends meet, and a city that once symbolized opportunity began to represent decline. Detroit wasn't just losing jobs, it was losing its identity. The cost of chasing efficiency was a heavy burden borne by its people. The global financial crisis of 2008 wasn't just a hit to Wall Street, it was a knockout punch to Detroit. As credit markets froze and consumer confidence vanished, car sales plummeted almost overnight. The big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, found themselves gasping for air. To GM and Chrysler, survival meant swallowing their pride and turning to the government for help. Massive bailouts kept the companies alive, but at a steep cost. Thousands of jobs lost, factories shuttered, and retiree benefits slashed. While the bailouts may have stopped total collapse, they couldn't rewind the damage that had already been done. The crisis exposed years of bad decisions, over-reliance on gas-guzzling vehicles, failure to innovate, and a bloated corporate structure that resisted change. wasn't just about a bad economy, it was about reckoning with decades of mismanagement, complacency, and corporate greed. And for Detroit, the damage was deep and personal. In 2013, Detroit made headlines for all the wrong reasons. It became the largest American city to ever file for municipal bankruptcy, a stunning fall from grace for what was once the proud heart of America's auto industry. The city was drowning in over $18 billion of debt. Its streets, once filled with opportunity and life, were now lined with decaying buildings and abandoned homes. Vital services like police and fire departments were severely underfunded and understaffed, leaving citizens vulnerable and disillusioned. But this wasn't just a financial collapse. It was a social one. Schools closed, crime soared, families fled. The city that helped build the American dream was now a living symbol of what happens when leadership fails and short-term profits are put before long-term responsibility. Detroit's bankruptcy wasn't just a tragedy. It was a wake-up call for the nation. Detroit's collapse wasn't just a result of economic missteps. It was a warning shot. It highlighted what happens when short-term gains are valued over long-term strategy. For decades, profits were prioritized over innovation, and warning signs were ignored. The city paid the price. But Detroit's story doesn't end in ruins. It's slowly becoming one of redemption. Over the past few years, glimmers of hope have returned. Entrepreneurs, artists, and new industries are planting roots. Tech startups and green energy projects are finding homes in once abandoned buildings. There's a renewed focus on education, job creation, and rebuilding trust in local communities. More than anything, Detroit teaches us that no city or industry is too big to fail, and no fall is too great to recover from. Real, lasting success demands forward-thinking leadership, flexibility, and above all, a commitment to the people who keep the engine running. Detroit may have been knocked down, but it's proving it still has the grit to rise. Detroit didn't fall overnight, and it didn't fall for just one reason. It was a slow-moped collapse, built on decades of greed, missed opportunities, and a failure to listen to workers, to consumers, to the warning signs. But the story of Detroit isn't just about loss. It's also about what happens when we forget that people, not just profits, are what make industries thrive. The factories, the neighborhoods, the communities. They were built by hard-working people who gave everything, only to be left behind. Today, Detroit is trying to rise again. There's a new energy in the city, with startups, artists, and builders coming together to shape what comes next. It's not easy, and it'll never be like it was, but maybe that's the point. Because the real lesson here, the future doesn't belong to the greedy. It belongs to those who learn, adapt, and lead with purpose. Thanks for watching, and if you found this story powerful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more.